Support for On Being with Krista Tippett comes from the Fetzer Institute. Fetzer supports a movement of organizations that are applying spiritual solutions to society's toughest problems. Learn more at fetzer.org.
I'm Krista Tippett. Up next, my unedited conversation with public interest technologist Latanya Sweeney. There is a shorter, produced version of this wherever you found this podcast. Hi, Latanya.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here and have the opportunity to talk with you.
I've really been looking forward to it. Do you have any questions for me before we start? Anything at all?
No, I'm just excited to have a conversation with you.
Okay. Well, Zach, okay, I got my thumbs up. So one of the things I'm always interested in is where the seeds of the passions and the questions that drive someone root, in a person's earliest life. And so I kind of want to circle around that as we begin. I know you grew up in Nashville. Were you born in Nashville?
I was born in Nashville in 1959, so you have to go back in time.
Yeah. And then so I've read, I've been reading other interviews you've done and, the ubiquitous YouTube videos of our time. And so I've heard you saying that, even as a young girl, you loved mathematics. You knew at some point you wanted to be a computer scientist. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And which was really odd because no one I knew in my neighborhood wanted to do math. Kids were dreaming of being policemen and firemen and so forth. But I was the only one who just had this crazy passion for math.
But it's also so interesting to me that you were thinking about computer science early because it was really the stuff of science fiction, right? I mean, in the 60s when I was alive too. I mean, I'm even curious about, what objects would have come to mind to the young Latanya if you said the word technology. I mean...
Well, I didn't have a particular, way before I knew a thing called a computer or what a computer was about, there was this idea of building a learning machine, a machine that could learn and think and actually be a part of my daily life. And I think that also predisposed me when I first did encounter in high school a computer science course or computer programming course, to be more exact.
Yeah.
And it was to really be transformative in my life.
Mm. And, I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about is this thread that runs through this insistence that you bring to your life and to your work about pursuing the practical and the moral good that is possible in our lives with technology, even as you have wide open eyes and are applying a fierce intelligence to attending to what goes wrong and what can go wrong. And so I'm also just really curious about if you think about how this moral compass was planted in you. I mean, was there in that background of your childhood a kind of moral or spiritual or religious formation that however you would define that now?
Yeah, I also think it was it may have been part of what drew me to math in the first place. I was raised by my great-grandparents. They were born in the 1899 and 1900.
Oh, my gosh.
And I was, of course, the only person I've ever known who was raised by their great-grandparents.
Yeah.
And it was everyone else in my neighborhood had a mother, a father, and siblings. And here I was, just so unusual. It was just such an unusual arrangement at the time. And it just seemed like everything in my life was messy like that. And I really liked the certainty of math, the idea, at least back then, in that level of mathematics, there was a right answer. and I think it really brought certainty to my life, which seemed really kind of uncertain and kind of nebulous. I think that's part of what drew me to math. And the other piece, of course, is that was a tremendous arc of history that my great-grandparents were able to share with me. And sometimes we would muse about, their 1899 origin and maybe my 2050 ending and what are the big lessons learned and what are the arcs, where did the arc of history leave them? I mean, you have to realize they survived, they spent their young adulthood in the South during Jim Crow laws.
Gosh.
And but yet they were positive people. I mean, they just somehow, their better angels just really showed all the time, and which I thought was pretty amazing. But they had learned lessons in life, and I just think that added to this idea of a kind of black and white, do the right thing, guiding oneself and belief in oneself.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. I mean, it's also true that you, in your lifetime in this profession, have really been there at the birth of new fields and fields within the field, right? I mean, none of your professors, even when you got to college or graduate school, I think, would have had a degree in computer science.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey with computer science computer science and me. In particular, like as you pointed out, by the time I go to college, there were no professors who actually had computer science degrees. Computer science was this blend of mathematics and electrical engineering at MIT. And so that's pretty much where my professors came from those two camps.
And yet were they so that it wasn't the origin of their degrees, but they were at that point was it called computer science even?
It was actually called computer science back then. The original founding paper that really started to make the case for computer science is in 1965. It appears in Science. And it's by three people who become really well known in computer science, and the name of the paper is "What is computer science? What is this thing?"
I mean, and then just to keep going here, you in 2001. So actually, more than 100 years after your great grandparents were born, you became MIT's first African American woman to earn a PhD in computer science.
Yeah. That's a sad state of affairs for MIT.
It is.
It really is.
Like, it says everything about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's absolutely not a good thing. And I don't think the numbers have gotten a lot of improvement since either. What's really interesting is that also has played a lot in shaping the work that I do. Being the only Black or the only woman often in the room, and recognizing for the world that the technology has lots of values baked into its design, but those values pretty much come from 20-year-old white guys who don't have families, right? and everyone else in society is struggling when their use case wasn't really a part of the base design, because nobody else was in the room.
Yeah, and I was thinking as I was getting ready to talk to you about how, so, I started this show 20 years ago, but actually started piloting before that. So I like to say at the turn of the century, right around the same time, time that you were breaking that embarrassing milestone. And the conversation that I was having 20 years ago, or across these decades, and I mean, it's so interesting to remember, even like that's pre-social media, right? So the conversation was about the internet, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so the technological revolution was the internet, and I've always been seeking out people who bring wisdom to this, and who are thoughtful, and who were thinking in moral terms and about social implications. And one of the ideas that came through that really has shaped the way I've approached both kind of my life with technology and this conversation is the idea that as all-encompassing and dramatic as these technologies have been and in how they've landed in our lives, and so even for those of us who are kind of in the middle of our lives, right, and then suddenly we're in like a new country, that these technologies, the internet, as we would say 10 or 15 years ago, is still in its infancy, and that we remain, even though it doesn't feel like this, we remain the grown-ups in the room, and that it has been ours to shape these technologies to human purpose. And I feel like this is precisely the lens that you took on. I mean, maybe for all the reasons that you and I just went over, that really feels to me like it runs through all these various things you've done, what you teach, but also founding the Public Interest Tech Lab and working, for, U.S. Federal Trade Commission, a professor of the practice of government and technology, and the work you're doing with kind of technology in the civic space. So I don't know, does that sound to you like an accurate way to talk about, your lens of approach on all of this?
Yeah, it's pretty consistent. In many ways, just as my passion with math led me to computer science, and my love of computer science, led me to realize that the world was changing. It was really clear by the time I was a graduate student that there was a revolution coming and it was going to change everything. Yeah. But in my naiveness at the time and in my excitement as a graduate student, I said, yeah, but it's going to right all of the wrongs of society. It's going to make everything right. After all, technology doesn't see race. It doesn't see gender. It's cheap. Mm-hmm. It can be easily reproduced. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was going to lead us all to a better democracy, a more perfect world. And so in many ways, I think now that the decades have rolled by, my pursuit from the graduate student years on has really been the same, and that is how to make technology deliver on that promise, on that vision, And just as math gave me certainty and comfort, I want society to have technology without all the harms. And that's absolutely possible because most of the harms that we experience are arbitrary or added on. And they don't have to be that way.
And, I think that those kinds of, that idealism and optimism and those rose-colored glasses that you talked about, I think that was true of society as a whole, right? We went into this very optimistically.
Yeah, but I think the difference was I felt like, wait a second, this guy's messing up. And meanwhile, like you're saying, society says, this is the best thing since apple pie. Right? Don't tell me about these problems, Latanya. We want to just keep using this shiny new thing. And I'm like, yeah, but you can use the shiny new thing, but the shiny new thing needs to behave itself. It needs to be doing this or that.
Right. You're the grown-up.
Right, exactly. And what's really funny? My first professorship was at Carnegie Mellon, and I would teach a class called Data Privacy. And students would take my class, and I would wonder why they even bothered to sign up because they didn't believe in privacy, right? And in particular, what that meant was it wasn't that they didn't believe in privacy. They didn't believe that the technology would violate their privacy. Yeah. And they were arguing, but if privacy on Facebook was a problem, how come we'd all be in it together? It would be a bigger deal, they'd say. Sure. But it was literally society just in love with it. Now let's fast forward to today. Today I teach classes, the students call them the Save the World classes. Yeah. And now the students, if I don't even bring up, before I can even bring up privacy as one of the kinds of clashes that we talk about with society, with technology and society, the students will bring up privacy very quickly, and they'll even use examples from Facebook, and I'll look like, what just happened?
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And then they'll go on to talk about the stealth activities they have to undertake in order to have privacy on Facebook. And so when I then give to them what my earlier students gave to me as questions, they say, well, that's, and I asked them what happened. They said, oh, that's because that was my parents' generation. And then I look and I say, oh my God, that's true.
Oh my gosh. Did that happen quickly or gradually? Was that a kind of big pivot generationally?
Yeah,
the thing you're talking about?
It has definitely been a big pivot. It's that point where society seemed to have moved from open, just blind trust in technology to concerns, major concerns, real concerns. And it even I think certainly 2016 was a huge change in that perspective, but it had started happening right before 2016, if you use students as an indicator.
I mean, you actually had a kind of big turning point of your own, a before and an after moment. in 1997, which I guess was your version of this pivot, which involved me. So where did I read that? You said you met an ethicist who told of a grim future where technology rules our lives.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing. I was a graduate student at the time at MIT, and I was sort of walking through the lounge on my way to get some coffee, and I hear this ethicist say computers are evil. Now, you have to remember, as a graduate student, I'm thinking of, oh my God, this amazing world is about to unfold. And now I hear this person say computers are evil. I'm like, I got to stop and fix her thinking. Like, what is she, like, doesn't she understand what technology is about? And so she and I get engaged in this conversation, and it's like 10,000 foot up. And eventually we start coming down to some concrete examples, and she names one in particular. She says, well, look at this. There's this health insurance that was given out to health insurance about state employees, their families, and retirees. All of their hospital records were included in this. And a copy has already been given to researchers and another copy sold to industry. And so and I said, yeah, but look, oh my God, if that's done at scale, we could save lives sooner. We could find better ways to cut costs. We could come up with hypotheses about related to illness and disease and treatment. And she says, yeah, that's all true. But what if the data is not anonymous? Because when you look at the data, it doesn't have name, it doesn't have address, it doesn't have social security number. So it doesn't have any explicit identity in it. And so she says, if the data is anonymous, that would be great. But if the data is not anonymous, then people could identify our judges and they could blackmail them, And she went on to talk about all the ways that the data could be used to sort of undercut our expectations in society. And she literally kind of foretold the future about not just that technology, but other technologies sort of breaking our social contracts. So now in my eagerness, I'm like, well, let me explain. I'm sure that data is just fine, I tell her. So I look at the data, and in the demographics, it has month, day, and year of birth, gender, and 5-digit zip code. And so I do this quick calculation in my head. There are 365 days in a year. Let's say people live 100 years, and there were 2 genders in the database. If you multiply that out, that's 73,000 possible unique combinations. But I happen to know that the typical 5-digit zip code in Massachusetts only had about 25,000 people. And so that meant that data would probably be unique for most everyone in that was there in the data. So now my hopes are like fading.
And this is a way, because I had kind of trouble just kind of comprehending. But so here's another way. I think you said it somewhere. 80, or somebody wrote, 87% of the population of the United States can be uniquely identified by only their date of birth, gender, and 5-digit zip code.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Which is stunning to say it that way.
Yeah, and it was an amazing situation. In that particular data set, I used as an example William Weld when he was the governor of Massachusetts. Only 6 people had his date of birth. Only 3 of them were men, and he was the only one in his 5-digit zip code. So by linking the voter data on the health data on those same fields, you could put his name uniquely to his record. And then, like you said, using 1990 census data, we estimated that 87% of the population were kind of like Governor Weld. And what was pretty amazing, though, is that about a month later, I was testifying down in D.C.
Yeah.
And about 3 months to 6 months later, laws around the world were changing, citing that example. It's often called the Weld experiment. And it's pretty, and the reason was it wasn't just that one data set. That was the best practice around the world. And what that experiment really shows us is how technology, and of course the technology we're talking about then is a personal computer with a 70 megabyte hard drive.
Right.
But it was about how society wasn't aware of the ways that these changes in technology would undercut our expectations for all kinds of values, from and now of course even democracy itself.
I'm sorry, this is Paul at WBUR. Can I just interrupt real quick? Professor Sweeney, I've kind of noticed you've sort of leaned forward to the point where you're kind of way past the mic. I think if you back up just a, yeah. I think
About like this?
There we go.
Oh, that even sounds better in my ear.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, well, we want the best recording possible. I want Krista's show to be fantastic, as they always are.
It's fantastic. You're fantastic. Okay, I thank you, Paul. I want to read something actually just because it's fun to read, but as we keep going, it's also just kicks us a little deeper into this. So this is actually, I guess this was in Scientific American. It was an article about you, and I guess it was when you were at Carnegie Mellon. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
There's a visual. Radio is the most visual medium, so get ready. Latanya Sweeney attracts a lot of attention. It could be because of her deep affection for esoteric and cunning mathematics. Or maybe it is the black leather outfit she wears while riding her Honda VTX 1300 motorcycle around the sedate campus of Carnegie Mellon University, where she directs the Laboratory for International Data Privacy. Whatever the case, Sweeney suspects the attention helps to explain her fascination with protecting people's privacy. Because at the heart of her work lies a nagging question. Is it possible to maintain privacy, freedom, and safety in today's security-centric, data-based world where identities sit ripe for the plucking?
Yes, I still ride the motorcycle, but I've updated to an Indian Springfield. But
okay.
Yes.
Glad to know that. You often bring kind of a historical perspective in when you're in conversations. The context that this new technological state we're in is a new industrial revolution. These companies, these digital technologies are not like what we've had before, and I find that really helpful in so many ways. Is that something that you became aware of gradually, or how did that start to dawn on you? How has that helped you put all of this into perspective?
Well, what made me start to think about surely society's experienced something like this before was when it first started, as you know, is data privacy, starting with the Weld experiment. And that goes on to sort of pioneer this field known as data privacy. And that was sort of the first major clash was privacy. But then we look up, and then there are these discrimination and biases in algorithms. And I was first to do some work in that and sort of shed light on how algorithms that are supposed to be statistical decision making are actually not what we really should be using, and we have to really question whether it's appropriate, giving us the appropriate answers. And I had so many graphic examples, and others came and also showed even more. And so that's been a real problem. And so by the time we got to the third wave around some of the democracy and election work and how technology was undercutting our democracy and so forth, you start to realize that, oh my God, the number of problems is just growing exponentially. Mm-hmm. So I teach a class, the Save the World class, as the students call it, and we try to tackle 4 real-world problems in real time during the semester. We take 4 real-world clashes, and sometimes the solution is technology or policy that'll fix it. Sometimes it's an experiment to sort of show the nature and character of the problem, or whatever the issue is, we just tackle them, and we do it 4 times, which is pretty amazing. And then we turn the students loose, and they do it a 5th time. When I used to teach the class, I sort of would preload the class with what were going to be our 4. And the first few years, you would choose 4 out of maybe 6. And the next year is like, I'm going to choose 4 out of these 25.
Right. You mean all the things just could immediately occur that were problematic?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to make progress if we only do 4 a year, right?
Right.
Or fifth with even some of the students. And then you realize that, oh my God, it's changing everything. And so the question was, where else has society experienced something like this? And so as I began to look historically, I started looking first at by technology. And I'm like, no, but this is bigger than that. It's bigger than a television. It's bigger than, it's not just communication. It's bigger than the printing press, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when I came to realize, as I was reading about the history and the impact of the Second Industrial Revolution. And I wasn't the first to make this awareness, because the historians themselves have been calling the times we're going through the Third Industrial Revolution. And they put the start date back at 1950 with the invention of the semiconductor.
Okay.
And now, then if you think about it, our iPhones and iPods and the Internet of Things, the Internet, all of these things are sort of revolutions within this revolution.
Yeah.
And now, as we are looking at generative AI, it's yet another revolution.
Yeah.
And it's changed everything already: how we live, how we work, how we play, how we communicate with each other. And the end is nowhere in sight. We don't know when this is going to end. And yet, the earliest of the clashes, like privacy, are still not resolved.
No, right. It feels like they're almost just they keep being at the beginning again, almost.
Yeah, it feels like we're
right.
It's like, but except you have to take stock in those students. You have to take stock in the fact that today's students are more skeptical of technology. It's not that they don't want the shiny new thing. They're saying, well, how could this go wrong? And for the first time, when one of these new innovative technologies come forward, like generative AI, it's the first time that I'm getting everyone from government officials to civil society organizations asking, how can this go wrong? They're sort of asking up front, not just running after the shiny new thing.
So I want to talk about generative AI. Before we do that, though, I just want to say something that I came to understand about this matter of what makes our revolution different from previous ones. That and perhaps you were drawing on historians, but I heard you explaining this in a way that was really helpful. So when the car was invented, for example, it's like with previous technologies, there was a runway, that even, like, as you said, with cars, you had to build roads, right? I mean,
Right.
there was time with the car or the camera or the telephone or even the printing press between the conception of something, the design of something, the distribution of something, and it becoming part of people's lives. And that in that time, there was deliberation on what could go wrong, right? Like that there was time and space going. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was time, and also it required a social contract. So, for example, we had cars, but who owned the roads? I mean, the roads were made; they were primarily horses were using them. They were made out of dirt. There was nothing but potholes, and to try to run cars over it, that meant we needed cities and others to invest in actually building roads.
Yeah.
And that was a negotiation between society and the manufacturers that had to unfold. And what happened during that unfolding? Well, when you first would get in the car and you push the gas pedal, we don't know how fast it might go, right? It might go slowly forward, or it might just bolt as fast as it could go. And brakes, if you hit the brake, it may not work quite as you might expect, certainly not to today's standards. Well, these things caused harms to individuals and became major lawsuits and concerns, and so as a result, if you want paved roads, you basically have to improve the safety of the automobile. And
right. So all this was working in concert.
That's right.
Complicated process, as you say, that brought everybody in before it was launched on the world.
Yeah. Or certainly as it was unfolding. But here, where commercial adoption is the only thing that makes it that's needed.
Right.
And where the cost is usually a free technology, or seemingly free. It's not really free, but seemingly doesn't cost me out of my pocket to use use Google search, for example.
Right.
It makes you feel as there's no downside.
Right. And so one of the things that you've also been really leading on is this matter of, okay, so in this world we inhabit with these technologies, we have what is the right way to intervene? I mean, which really is a way to ask to get really pragmatic and granular about that question of how to shape these technologies to human purpose. And you talk about looking for the sweet spot. Would you explain that?
Yeah, exactly. Normally when some clash happens, it's usually, by the way, when the technology's gone through the life cycle all the way into the marketplace, and now the problem rears itself and society finds itself in a take it or leave it situation. Mm-hmm. And when it's in that take it or leave it moment, that's exactly how the discussion goes. It's either all or nothing. It's a zero-sum game. If I have to give up privacy, if I have to have more privacy, I have to give up some utility. If I need more utility, I can't have the privacy. And this kind of zero-sum argument is so far from the truth. The truth is, most of the time, it's a design issue. Either the commercialization of the product is causing the clash or an arbitrary design decision. And in those particular cases, there exist these sweet spots where we can actually have all of the benefits or maximize the utility, and we can do it without the harms. And so that's what we try to do in the work that I do is how do we get society and the manufacturer to move to this sweet spot?
And that means
that sometimes
asking these questions and having this deliberation in the design stage before it's out in the marketplace. Is that right?
Right. So we have solutions all the way through the life cycle. So if it's really early on, the best thing, you can start off with some principles. If you're funding this thing, you can say, well, look, I have these principles and I want this thing to adhere to the principles. Now, principles alone are not going to get you a technology that's clash free. But during design, you can do risk assessments, you can do various kinds of impact assessments to know where are the problems and how do you go about fixing them. And usually that's the cheapest, easiest way because it's usually just incidental. But by the time a business package gets put on it, how it's going to be sustained, how it's going to make money, and then it goes into the marketplace where it gets adopted, now it's really hard. Those easier solutions, they're gone. That time is gone already.
Yeah.
And so now we're left into this take it or leave it, and the sweet spots are harder to get to because either we've got to have some patch or some technology add-on, or we're going to have to live with the harms or something like that. Or there's going to be a lawsuit and it's going to take so long for it to be resolved that some new technology will replace it.
And it sounds to me like you are kind of behind the scenes of our public narrative of imminent catastrophe. You are actually consulting with VCs. Are you also in conversations inside these companies?
So yes, in part. I mean, you have to think if you're the company. So the VC world is a fascinating world. It has an entrepreneurial spirit, a can-do, roll up your sleeves, we're going to make this happen. And which I love because that's exactly my attitude too. We're going to build this technology just right. We're going to solve these problems. And so there's in that way we're very much alike. But making technology is not as easy as it sounds. If it already existed, somebody would have done it, right? I mean, if somebody has already done it, then it's easy to replicate. It's a lot easier to replicate than it is when you're doing the first one. And that means that there's some hard problem to solve, and people are busy trying to solve this very hard problem. So they're not trying to do evil; they're just ignoring all the other problems that their creation could create. And we're trying to say, no, you've got to think about this too. This is not okay to just ignore that. And then from a VC standpoint, there's also this business package question of, well, the investment needs to make money eventually in a particular time period. And it creates a kind of interesting tension because on the one hand, if there's a problem that's not being resolved in design that could be resolved in design, they could risk disruption, right? They could end up losing their investment completely if society shuns it. And we've come close to that in society, but more often we don't. Instead, they just don't reap the full benefit of it.
Right.
Because it has some clash and it's got people a bit leery or uncomfortable and so forth. So we've been trying to work with venture capital and entrepreneurs to go ahead and take the more complicated route of thinking through what the clashes might be and are there easy, simpler solutions. Later, I also was the chief technology officer at the Federal Trade Commission for a while. So we also work with government who's got to figure out, how do I govern this thing? Like what is the responsibility to society when this new technology comes out? You don't want to get in the way of the market doing its thing, but to what extent most of the time, these clashes are kind of a market failure. There's no representation in our regular market system for them. Yeah. But yet their cost to us as a society is very great.
It feels to me like this orientation that has developed in you to, as you say, starting with just all-out enthusiasm, this is going to make everything better, and then becoming really aware of unforeseen consequences and of the need. And really, it's a creative challenge, right? Mm-hmm. To try to see those and work with them, which actually, in my mind, I feel like it's a move that culturally, it's actually a move of adulthood, right? Understanding that life is mostly is as much about things that go wrong or not as we plan, as things that go right, and that actually that's how we learn and grow. And yet we don't necessarily make those assumptions and behave that way, especially when it comes to the market. And so I guess now I'm just really curious about how all of these things you've done and this way you approach technology in general and our lives with technology, like how has this prepared you and shaped you now to greet this new world of generative AI?
Well, I mean, I still have the same excitement with all the technology. I definitely feel still the energy that I felt as a graduate student. But of course, we're far more worried now than we were as I wasn't a graduate student, because we haven't righted any of these clashes. We haven't resolved any of the big ones. And I think society itself is feeling the tethering. Like, so for example, social media, we don't have the slightest idea how to do content moderation at scale.
Right.
We just don't know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not the fault of Google or Twitter or anyone. We just don't know. Computer scientists haven't actually thought about it. We need great minds we need about 1,000 really good minds to really think about how do you solve content moderation at scale?
Yeah.
And we don't know, we haven't resolved how you build trust at scale. Journalism has gone through major transformations, disinformation, and so forth. What do you trust? And generative AI plays right into those fault lines, right into it.
Right.
They're going to be exasperated like times 10 or times 100. And so we don't really have time quite on our side either. It's a society we're not quite ready for. But on the other hand, generative AI is very exciting. So I think if anybody was to hear me talk and they walk away feeling gloom and doom, I don't have the gloom and doom. But at the same time, it is not the great panacea either.
Right. I will say it does though feel to me like it is quite a different moment from, let's say, social media being unleashed, right? I mean, Facebook becoming available to the public in 2006. There was, or just even the way we used to talk about those companies, how fun they are, right? And as you said, like algorithms are just math, right? It's just code. It's all morally neutral. And the connection economy, right? It's going to connect us. And I do feel like, and I really want to know, I want you to push back or add your own. It feels to me like this is a more sober moment that even the developers and coders are confessing that they're surprised by some of the speed and scale with which this has unfolded and some of what it has shown itself capable of. And it feels to me, of course, this is a big generalization, but there's a different kind of invitation even from the companies for society to help shape the way this technology unfolds. Are you experiencing that?
Well, I think it's really reliving you have to go, if you went back to 1990s, 1990, so that show you how old I am. If you were to go back to 1998, the biggest challenge of our time was e-commerce. That is, people wanted to use the internet, but they wanted to be able to find a way to submit their credit cards online safely. Right? Like, how can we do that? And of course, the answer turned out to be HTTPS. Those problems seem so simple and small in comparison to what we face today. But the company conversation is exactly the same. It's, as one of my colleagues said, they're saying, I want to do the right thing is what he says he hears, but what they really mean is they just want to do the thing. Right?
Okay.
And if I've got to talk to society to say, make sure we're not going to do any evil, we're going to just only do the right thing, that's what they're saying. But at the end of the day, they're excited by this product. They want to push they're making lots of money from it. They just want to make sure nobody's going to get in the way to stop it. And so we're happy that they are at least there, but that's not an honest engagement of what are risk and responsibilities, though.
Okay.
And it doesn't put them in the position of being forthright in terms of accepting more transparency or more accountability in what's going on.
Well, let me just ask you, as somebody in this field, you did use the word exciting a minute ago. I mean, what excites you and what surprises you about generative AI?
Well, in some ways, like I said, going back to my own age of history, I remember when spell checkers came out, right? And people were like, oh my God, children are going to never know how to spell again. We're all going to lose that. Or when word processing came along and people were like, well, what about handwriting? Nobody's going to teach it anymore.
Right.
And in that way, something like a ChatGPT is sort of in that same evolution. That is, I give it a prompt and it gives me a first draft. And it can be a first draft of anything, a poem, a chapter in a book, a song. I don't know. It could never do a Krista interview, but it does, So I'm excited in the sense that it's pushing us into another tool. Like, I'll just stick to ChatGPT now because I just think generative AI is much broader than only ChatGPT, but ChatGPT has become the poster child of it. And it's a great poster child because it's, you can go to the website, you can try it yourself, and you can produce anything out of it, right? And it has all of the benefits and features and concerns that we see in general with generative AI. So that's all. I think those are all the good things. But then I could flip around and say, so we're just moving the evolution from going from, writing to typing on a computer to spell checking on a computer to grammar checking to first drafts. Right. So one could argue that's the arc, and we shouldn't worry too much. But what makes this one also different on the concern side, though, is there's lots of concerns, one of which is the internet in 5 years, maybe even as short as 3 years, won't be the internet that we know today. Right now, most of the content on the internet, good or bad, wrong, right or wrong, full of disinformation or whatever, is pretty much human generated.
Right.
But in 3 years, most of the content is going to be bot generated.
Yeah, I've heard you say that.
And it's going to be a huge echo chamber. And so if we don't know how to do content moderation on social media, how do you do content moderation when it seems like every original piece of writing is saying the same thing and it's all really from the same source? Right.
So one of the questions that just prompts in me is maybe we just become I mean, we should be less trusting now than we are, right? I mean, maybe we just become more reasonably untrusting of what's on the internet. Maybe I guess I'm saying maybe it's okay. I mean, I realize that's really simplistic, but
so if it was 1995 and you said I'm going to be distrustful of what's on the internet, that's one thing, because because your notion of truth and your notion of news and your notion of what's right and your notion of whether or not what people believe is coming from all of these other sources that they had their own problems, but for the most part, we could argue they were probably more reliable than being in an echo chamber with ChatGPT, right?
right.
And so, but if the internet of today, or even the internet of tomorrow, we increasingly don't know how to know what's right. So let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
So if you ask ChatGPT just medical questions, which my students and I did this spring, one of the things that kind of popped out was if you ask medical questions around common diseases, sometimes you get the right answer and sometimes you get drink bleach. And then and if you ask it about more obscure medical problems, you get reliable content. And so why is that happening? It's happening because ChatGPT learned all it knows, and it actually doesn't know anything. It's just statistical correlations around words and how you put these words together. It learned it on the internet.
Right.
And so it has it has all the biases of the internet. So it's one of the most racist, sexist things you could imagine. It's so racist and sexist, they actually write a program to interface between ChatGPT and the world, right? And
the companies write that interface?
Yeah, so that certain things won't come out, like, but it's not perfect because we don't know how to do moderation at scale, right?
As you said a minute ago.
Right. So we don't even know how to moderate ChatGPT. So when we want it to reveal itself to have these biases, the students had so much fun finding great prompts that would make it reveal these types of biases.
Right. It seems to me also, though, that but by the same token, in terms of our agency, like that we have an agency to lower or raise the quality of what we get back from it by I hate this word prompt, right? Like it feels so simple, right? Because I want to say the quality of the questions we ask of it, which we're talking about in terms of prompt. I mean, you're using it in the classroom, right?
I use it in the classroom. I use it all the time because I want to know what it's good for and what it's not good for, and how to understand it.
And
I'll give you an example.
Yeah,
a student of mine typed in, this is literally the only thing that the student typed in, write a research paper by Latanya Sweeney. And what came out was a beautifully formatted research paper. It had an abstract, an introduction, a background, method section, statistically relevant results, and beautiful bibliography, references at the end. The only thing is, none of it's true. I never did that survey. I never did that study. That's, as far as I can tell, that study never happened. It was all about privacy too. It was all about data privacy, and the results were significant, and none of the references were real. Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing.
So what do you make of that? We keep the language. I'm speaking as a kind of consumer out here, non-specialist, not in the field, which most of us aren't. This language of hallucination.
That's right.
Which is it's such a fanciful, it's so interesting that that's the word that's being used, technically even. Yeah. Right? Because it's making things up. Right? Or you might say lying, right? Like you might say, if it were a person, you would call it lying.
Right. If you turn that in, and in fact, there was a lawyer that turned in a brief that ChatGPT made, and of course, none of the cases were real. Right. And so that lawyer has to personally suffer the consequences of that, because ultimately he's responsible for what he's submitted. But ChatGPT is not responsible.
It's a weird kind of creativity that it has. I'm just asking you as a computer scientist, how does that? What do you think of this weird creativity, or is that even not the right word?
It's been so we've been using completing readers for a while. So like if you go on your phone and you're typing in a text message or you're typing in a word processor and it wants to finish the sentence for you,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So all it's learned are what do you normally type after this? This is my best guess is what I think comes after this word, or this is what I think comes in. That's all ChatGPT is doing. This is my best guess is what I think would go here because
the best guess is that she would have done this study.
Right, exactly.
And it would have had these results.
Right, and that they would be statistically significant. I think that's the funniest part.
Right.
And it kind of and the references would kind of look like this. She'd have about 30 of them.
Right. I don't know. I don't even know what questions to ask about this. It just feels like such a new territory.
Yeah,
in some ways. I know what you're saying. It follows on territory we've been on.
But it is a new thing. It's a new tool. It has its own implications now, right? It's not even starting from scratch, which is one of the points that we're trying to make. But what do its challenges look like to society? Well, one of the things is I will never be able to trust reviews. We got to have a whole new way. Like I can never trust Amazon review or movie review because we have these heuristics we developed. Well, I know it's a real review because they wrote lots of text about it. I know it's a real review because they're talking so specifically. But now you can imagine, I'm sure there probably already is a company that will generate reviews for you at scale where every one of them is multiple paragraphs and none of them are made by humans. Right. And even in our governance, though, if you're a politician, your constituents are upset if you start receiving letters, say, or emails. Now, if all of the letters and emails all have the same pattern, somebody's running a campaign and lots of people are just sending the same letter or the email. But if every one of them goes on for 2 or 3 pages and each is unique from each other, is that lots of different people, or is it one person in 15 minutes running ChatGPT?
Oh my gosh. So, what I'm trying to think through now is what is the human condition? What are the human condition implications of generative AI? Yeah. And something that you also alluded to a minute ago, which I feel like we haven't kind of stated just clearly enough as what is the elemental thing that happened here, is that this technology is a student of us, right? Us on the internet, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's us on the internet, which is a huge qualification. So if I just say that phrase to you, the human condition implications of generative AI or ChatGPT, tell me where that takes your mind.
Yeah, well, it makes me a little afraid. It makes me afraid because like I was saying in the 1990s, if ChatGPT came out then, we had other trusted sources and people would have just been able to discount it. But we don't. Yeah. But our other trusted sources are gone. And and this conversation has been very focused on ChatGPT. We're coming up in the 2024 election, and fake videos, fake images that you can't distinguish is also another mind-boggling issue, right? So, me looking like I'm 18 years old today is so easy to do. Take a politician showing them in a compromising position that never happened, but that fuels a conversation or an argument that people the naysayers want to believe. It's just a matter of writing a prompt. Think about that. It's so crazy. And literally within 60 seconds, there is this beautiful image or there's this video of that person doing that.
Okay, but I'm talking to Latanya Sweeney, who says we don't have to sacrifice privacy to have the benefits of our technology. I mean, I'm just curious about how are you framing this for yourself and your students if you continue on this path you've been on doggedly these years. What do we do about that? Or what is it giving us to learn, which I think is another interesting question.
Well, I think the first thing that's and I think that's the right way to think about it too, Krista, is, what are the big things to learn here? What are the big takeaways, or where the space of harms are going to look like? Where the space of harms apt to be? And one of those harms, we just talked about, is any place where I'm expecting writing and original writing to be a proxy to be representative of a real person. That is no longer true.
Okay.
In 2016, my students and I, we were one of the first to find a whole series of disinformation that we call persona bots. But one of the things that was really interesting about that particular system of bots was that when they delivered disinformation, you would click on the link and it was an amazing website. Like, it looked like it was the New York Times, but it wasn't.
Wow.
But it was made up, or it looked like it could be a Wall Street Journal or something like that, with color paper, and fonts and everything. It was just amazing reproduction. And of course, 2 weeks later, that website's gone. And the stories in it were in the service of whatever the disinformation was. What's fascinating about that was clearly a state actor. That's the level of cost and complexity that was required to pull that off. But today, with generative AI, we're all amazing artists. We all can take photographs of things that didn't happen. We can all write articles. And we aren't doing the writing or the photographing and so forth. We're literally just typing a couple of prompts and letting the generative AI make it. That means that the level of disinformation is going to go up dramatically. Mm-hmm. And our instincts about what is truth is that's the big challenge generative AI gives us as a society.
Right. But, I feel like we've spent a lot of time arguing about whose facts are right. Mm-hmm. And in that, there was a flawed assumption that facts were ever what alone conveyed truth or landed in human bodies as truth. Yeah. So even, I realize I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate here, but even if, let's say, one of the things it gives us to learn is to be talking about the nature of truth.
That would be an accomplishment, right?
That would be an accomplishment.
And I think that's our best, that's a really great accomplishment that is one of the most important things for us to get our heads around now. That this challenge that's the biggest challenge we're facing. What do I think of as truth? What am I using? So that we become skeptics. The biggest problem is we don't have a replacement yet for it. We don't have a solution for it. But that's where I think the overarching challenge comes from. The second challenge is a U.S. one. The internet is mostly a U.S. Most of the data it learned on is from an American perspective, which means our stuff is the stuff.
Our subjectivity, our bias,
right,
our pathologies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just walk with me, if you will, down, how, so your students take this class. What's it actually called, officially called? Is it not called the Save the World class, is it? Well,
now we actually changed the title. So now it is actually called Technology Science to Save the World.
Okay. How is this going to be grappled with by those students and in that kind of context?
Yeah, so we spent last spring semester really just investigating generative AI and all of its forms, and including images and copyright issues and all these kinds of things to see, how can we produce a book in 3 days, things like that. And I think that gave us a lot of places to look, like the medical examples that I gave earlier. Like, when is it giving me right information and when is it giving me wrong information? When does it show its bias? Like, I forget exactly the prompt the student used, but it was comparing two candidates, and it says, well, she does okay for a girl.
Oh, my gosh.
And you're like, okay, well, there you go.
That's humanity, yeah.
Yeah. But but we're going to also be just sort of infiltrated with chat bots.
Yeah.
Now I don't know whether I'm typing to a human or whether it's really, some kind of generative AI. Even if I'm talking on the phone, it still could be a generative AI. And so these are the kinds of things that we're sweating through now, how it can all go wrong, given this whole huge wave of uses that, including within the university, right? It may not be your teacher. It may not be the one who's writing those comments about your paper. Maybe your teacher sent it over to ChatGPT to write a version of a response to your paper.
But I mean, is one implication of this that it weans many of us off the internet, right?
No.
I mean, no?
Well, or let's say it differently.
Okay.
Maybe the internet is just going to be a new kind. Maybe we're going to find a new thing. Because, our need for a North Star around truth is just fundamental to a democracy.
Doesn't go away. Yeah.
Right? We can't really survive if all of us come to a table with completely different belief systems and not even be able to find a common fact that we agree on. So we're going to have to navigate our society through to that. And that's going to take some unpacking to figure out what this means and how and how we get there. But I think that's the biggest challenge of generative AI is how do we build trust at scale?
But if you think about those previous worlds we talked about, I mean, yes, they had time, the printing press or the car or the telephone or whatever. It was a much longer span of time getting disseminated. But it was transformative, right? There was incredible upheaval. And that is also true for our age.
And well, you know what I would also liken it to? Electricity. So when electricity, like cars, had to be negotiated. That is, somebody had to run these power lines. Somebody had to have generators, and that required some negotiation. But people's houses burned down, and people would plug things in, and you plug it in, it would blow up in your hand. All of this stuff had to be.
Okay, you're not making things better, though.
Well, I didn't,
Yeah.
Mechanisms came to exist in society, like Underwriter's Laboratory and things like that, to help us navigate through that. Yeah. And, I think your question, though, is will we have enough time as the speed of generative AI is moving that we'll be able to find those problems and find those kinds of solutions before we're so transformed we can't find our way back?
Are you worried about that?
I don't want to leave on a doom gloom.
No, don't worry. I will not let this end on doom. I'm in charge in that sense, but I think we have to go all the way down this road. Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you. I do want to ask you again. What is the upside you see? What does excite you? Because you also are closer than the rest of us in seeing that.
I think, on the other hand, the ability to express ourselves is certainly enhanced. I have a 15-year-old son. He has an idea for a card game. I don't know if you know about Magic the Gathering, but one of the things about Magic the Gathering is they have they're kind of a trading card, but you play them also. And they have a lot of strategy in how you play them. But on the card, they have these beautiful images that artists have generated. So he decided that he had an alternative game he wanted to design around a chess theme, but he can't do that art, and he doesn't know artists that would give him art that he could use, like a blazing queen or a bishop threatening a knight and stuff like that. So he finds generative AI, he types in a few prompts, and voila, these amazing images come out, right? And then using standard word processing with different color fonts and so forth, he draws a really impressive looking cards. And he does this 80 times. And he did that within a month. That's amazing, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, we have a way of expressing our creativity that we never had before. I had a colleague who literally wrote a book in 7 days.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
I've been tortured myself and tortured my family for years trying to get this book done.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book in 7 days. That's crazy.
With ChatGPT as a companion, as a helper.
That's right.
I mean, what's clear is, especially again, I really like this historical perspective. We are the generation in the middle of the mess, right? Like
Right.
we're the generation right at the outset where we can see so clearly what is being undone.
Yep.
And we can see the dangers because this thing is accelerated in its development.
And we've seen a few cycles.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a few cycles.
We're wary in a way we weren't wary with Facebook in the beginning.
But until we can really get our head around how do we deploy an army of public interest technologists, we're not going to be able to get completely in front of it.
No. You do say that there is a field emerging of public interest technologists. I mean, that's not a phrase most people have heard.
Yeah, and it doesn't really flow off the tongue that easily.
No, but it's comforting when it does.
Yeah, and it's really, most importantly, though, it is really needed. Mm-hmm. It's really needed for someone who's going to represent society's interest and actually move us from what I would call a technocracy to back to a democracy. Back to right now, all of our rules that we live by are literally written by how the technology works, what the technology can do, whatever arbitrary design decisions it has. And if you're using decision-making algorithms, it doesn't even matter what our laws are if you can't enforce them if the technology goes contrary to them.
Right.
And so we need someone who's going to say, wait, I got to represent societal interests, meaning what are our values and what are the things that we hold dear? In particular, what are our laws, right? And how do we make sure they get protected in today's society? And that's at the heart of public interest technology, is helping society navigate its way back to itself today.
I mean, I would like, you mentioned your son, and I would like to come back to, a 15-year-old. Is that how old you said he is? Yeah. I mean, because like this generation of humans in particular is, they're just being experimented on, right? I mean, they're in this, and so
they are the product.
They are the product, and I mean, in a way, though, I feel like. My kids are older. They're kind of in their 20s, or I'd say and the years matter so much. A single year in this span of time matters so much in terms of how the technology had developed. So it's quite different for my younger child, who's 5 years younger. But I feel like a 15-year-old now, is not right at the beginning. Like he probably has some instincts and some wiles and some wits about using and living with technology that is kind of an new evolutionary development.
Yeah, some of the best instincts I've had about that has been when he tries to write a paper for a school. I would ask, well, why do you think that that's a good reference? And he had really good instincts about what made a good reference. But 2 years from now, those instincts aren't going to work. Is it a big name? Is the font? Is it a website that's hard to produce? Do multiple websites that are hard to produce basically say the same thing? In the world of easy creation, which is what generative AI allows, easy false creation even. Yeah. Those tools aren't going to work. So even the tools that he's learned to navigate by aren't going to hold. And the other thing, too, I notice in him is a kind of naiveness around who you're talking to when you're talking on the internet.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to go back. When I was 15, there used to be this old saying, "Go west, young man." And what that saying meant was that we had all these laws that if you messed up you could start over. And the particular phrase, go west, young man, really referred to if you messed up on the East Coast, you could go to the West Coast where nobody knew who you were and you could start over. But but many of our laws also had this kind of forgiveness to them. We closed juvenile records, bankruptcy, you get to start over after so many years, and the list goes on and on. But none of that's true anymore. Right? And and whatever my 15-year-old wrote when he was 12 or 13 on the internet is still on the internet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that would also be in this field of public interest, public service technology, these whole new challenges to pick up.
Yeah, but think of it this way. What if we succeed? Think of the world then. We would have our democracy would be restored, our quality of lives would be restored, and we would have all these benefits.
Yeah. I wanted to touch down on the fact that you also write poetry. Which might
tells you? Oh, boy, you really do your homework.
Come on,
you know
come
that?
on. It's on the internet. All
Yes,
right?
from
What are we talking
1990 something.
about? Okay, well, just as you said, everything has eternal life online. All right. No, but it might sound like a non sequitur, but I actually think, one of my questions again, if I think about the human condition angle on this, is. What do we learn about what makes us human in having to grapple with these technologies, right? And of course, we know that that ChatGPT can write poetry, but I would also say that where poetry comes from in us and the full range of what it expresses about the human experience is, very much also embodied, and that embodied human experience is not present on the internet in its fullness, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know. Does that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about a joint friend of ours earlier, and whenever I haven't gotten very many emails from her, but whenever I get them, they are stunning in her use of words. And ChatGPT will never be able to do that, right? There's something just amazing about the human ability that is not completely captured. And so maybe what we're saying is ChatGPT and all the other things that we do in our lives where I just need to send a note. I'm sure she doesn't send every email like that, right?
Right.
But and I'm sure there are some emails where she just needs to get something out right away. Maybe those are the things that we leave to ChatGPT, and these amazing pieces where we reach into our heart and into our souls and try to convert that feeling and emotion into words or into writing or into a drawing will still be there. And we'll learn to distinguish the two.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I guess that's the muscle we have to grow. I mean, there's a poem called Blood Passage, from 1996 online.
I'm going to delete those as soon
But you say at the bottom it was written for a family reunion. And I don't know that it's about you, but clearly there's a generational thing because you say my hands are old and withered, and your hands would not have been old and withered at that point. But there's clearly but anyway, there's a reference in the middle of this. I am old and you are young. We span 200 years. I know the past 5 scores. You hold 5 more still. Is that a reference to the 200-year present idea of Elise Boulding, or were you just really counting?
No, it was really a reference back to my great-grandparents.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what I was doing. Great-grandparents.
He
truly spanned 200 years.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like, go on.
No, really, when they would talk about their parents or their grandparents, I mean, it's mind-boggling to go back to think about somebody, talking about their parents in the 1880s. I mean, it's like...
And I guess I just wonder, do we start to see this kind of experience and perspective we have in a new light? because of what the technologies take away from us, that they can do better.
You mean are you, let's flesh it out more, Krista. Are you saying that the literal, the fact that everything is so literally preserved, or do you mean?
No, I just mean more, again, having this embodied experience of 200 years. You can't, you can write about that, but you can't feel it. All right. I mean, we have this in our bodies, and you put it in, you put some words on a page that express it.
Now, hallucinate as it might, it's not likely to bring those connections together. And I think that's what you're after, that it's going to the things that are said 90% of the time, it's going to say it. It's going to hallucinate to connect to the 190% to another 90%.
Right.
Right? But it's the unusual pieces that hold the idea. That's not going to really happen. It might happen once in a while, but it's not going to happen regularly, right?
I mean, if you think about the notion of intelligence, I mean, one thing I think, I'm still remembering the days when I was working in a big media organization, and the internet came along, and there was the new media department, and then at some point that became a completely ridiculous phrase because the new media was media, and all the old media had to convert to it.
Gone.
And so I'm so curious about this language of artificial intelligence is clunky, and it I'm sure it's placeholder now, but intelligence. I mean, like, I do, and you've been working with intelligence and with computing intelligence. I mean, how does this technology and this kind of interface you have with the technology make you think about the meaning of intelligence?
Yeah, this is really fantastic. So if we were to go back in time to the 1990s and look at artificial intelligence, which I was a student of at the time, there were two kinds of schools of thought. There was this idea of symbolic, that we don't know what computers can do, but here's what we're going to do to make them smarter. We're going to make a smarter computer by taking something that an intelligent expert can do, finding a way for computers to embody that knowledge, and then let the computer exhibit that knowledge to others. So it's sort of a curation of knowledge to build a knowledge base and then make this knowledge base useful. And so you can think like one of the best cases back then was blood diseases. It's more detailed than you want to know, but in the medical community, this was kind of a big deal. You only have a few experts, and now you could have their expertise sort of modeled, and now doctors in the field could get expert advice. And so this is kind of was the real promise. Then there was this other little ragtag group over on the side, and they were like, yeah, but what about statistics? What about just having statistical relationships between things? Most of the time, it's always the same thing. If I say fill in the dash in the middle of a line, you'll know what word, because that's the word. If I say good morning, how? You'll say, are you?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And that was their whole thing. Let's just do statistical. We don't need all that. That's a whole lot of hard work. Embodying knowledge, extracting it, figuring out how you're going to deliver it. And so we laughed at them. We laughed at the neural net people, and we said, yeah, that's never going to get anywhere. We can only build one of those models for, we only had so much data. It's just not really helpful. No. And now we fast forward to today. It's not so much that the technology from that time has gotten so much better. It's that our data we've gotten so much more data.
Right. The well of data is
that's
vast.
Right. If you had all of the internet to learn from, and you had $100 million of computing time, you too could build a statistical correlation model. So I think that model will always be with us. It'll be the thing that we'll have to work from, and and sort of one of the things we'll have to do is figure out how to take this very imperfect model, and how do we augment it in ways to make it more responsible and more perfect. So that's a whole nother area of work that my students and I will be looking at.
I love thinking about you and your students looking at that. I mean, I also just think, human intelligence, is so much more than thinking, right? I mean, there is knowledge intelligence, but there's also the intelligence of love or care or parenting, or, you gave this beautiful talk. Thank you, Internet, again, for at the Arlington Church in Boston, Arlington Street Church, right?
Oh my gosh!
About amazing. Your philosophy of giving, right? Like that's right. That's a kind of intelligence that is different from thinking intelligence or civic, right? You and I both love that language of the civic, and civic intelligence is also different from private, individual.
Yeah. I don't think anyone is going. I mean, maybe there are a few people out there who might try to claim something like a ChatGPT has intelligence, but but if we go back over the arc of time in the work of artificial intelligence, this notion of intelligence is. The artificial is more bigger than the word intelligence.
That's so interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about.
And at some point, when I saw the transition and statistics was overtaking the directions of AI, I actually wrote a paper about what is AI, right?
Oh.
Is it this belief that it's really human intelligence that has to be conveyed into computers to be shared broadly? Or is it some mathematical ideal or statistical model? And the paper is really just about how textbooks shifted in what they told students.
Now? I mean, how would you answer? How would you just start to answer that question now? What is artificial intelligence?
Well, I think now, unfortunately, our dreams for it decades ago and the manifestations of it, it's now quickly becoming, once it's in the mainstream as a term, it becomes the thing that's in the mainstream as a term.
Okay.
Right?
So it just is what you see.
And unfortunately, now I think it is. And I think those of us, the truth is, back in the day, what AI really was the pursuit of building a human. It was literally, it was no different than artist, in Grecian urns, where you're just trying to represent an image of man or an image of your time. Humans have always tried to find ways to express their intelligence and to make likenesses of themselves. Yeah. And in that way, that's really, when I was a graduate student, AI was at the heart of AI, what drove us. But today, what is AI is none of that, right? It's just like you said, it's just a statistical correlation of the internet, right? Or a statistical correlation of images. It's got some fine-tuning algorithms. I don't want to take away from the great work of a lot of the computer scientists recently. I don't want to take that away. But I'm in at a 10,000-foot picture. This is what it looks like.
But I think it's really helpful to hear somebody just define that, because I feel like that fact is not. It's hard to it's hard for kind of ordinary people out here for us to just see. Some of the things that are actually simple, not simple, but straightforward about it, what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just. I think I want to ask, just following on that, just as we wind down. So let me just ask the question this way. With this life you've led, with this intelligence and knowledge base that is yours, your engagement with our technologies, what do you keep learning? What are you learning now about what it means to be human?
Oh my God, that would definitely be. I take so much hope for tomorrow. I have the luxury of living and working with these 20-year-olds who are just amazing. They're just amazing. And the society that we're passing over to them, I have to apologize to them on a regular basis. I'm sorry about this, but it is what it is. Yeah. And they're eager, and they're open. Their eyes are open wide to see the world as it is. And what they need to, and what they're inheriting, and what they need to take on. So I do have a lot of hope in the future, and I don't think that's something. I think that's also particularly a human trait. I mean, there are many others, love and so forth.
Yeah. That hope is what you possess, and that itself is an expression. It's a manifestation of the thing I'm asking you to give some definition to.
Yeah. You want more definition?
No. Is there anything else you might want to add, or anything we didn't talk about, or something that rose up in you as we were going?
Well, I mean, it's so easy to talk to you. I could talk for hours. I'm cognizant of your time, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh.
It's always a pleasure to hear you talk too. By the way.
Well, it's been really fun, and thoughtful, and thank you so much. Thanks for everything you're doing, which also is just good for people to know about.
Well, thank you.